the police department, shirt reading, "My sons should be burying me." 2 funerals, officers on desk duty, just because we're not retraining our mind. Still no questions answered. Why are we repairing this bias? Heart still breaking. But still, Black lives matter. Blue lives matter. So let's retrain our mind. So let's not mourn the death of innocent victims and celebrate the death of law enforcement. While nobody is screaming parents' lives matter, nobody is screaming children's lives matter. So why is this? Who has their back? Why aren't we retraining our mind? Why aren't we repairing this biasness? Let's let down our guard. Have an open mind. Be a listener. Let someone else share their side till we fix this problem. It starts with hello. I guess that won't start until the next tragedy. No, it must stop. It must stop now. We all play a part. So let's play it. We must fix this problem. What has been can't be no more. It's been badly damaged. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out to the community forum.
Thank you, Carrie, for those words. That poem, in essence, is about empathy and understanding everybody has a side. And if we can put our own lives, our own perceptions in somebody else's shoes, then maybe we can start to heal and move down a different path. My name is Eric Moore, and I am the incoming chapter president of Delta Rho Lambda of Alpha Phi Alpha. We're located here in San Antonio. I ask that right now everybody silence any cell phones, anything that goes beep, any Apple Watches, any electronic devices. In the midst of the tragedies that have happened in Baton Rouge, Dallas, Minnesota, now again today in Baton Rouge, we decided to do something, take action. And we hope from this venue today we can come across properly. We will be received with love. And then we can take away actionable items on how we as individuals here in the San Antonio community can make a difference. Due to the severity of the fractured relationships all across this nation between police and communities, and also the importance of this town hall, I believe it's only right to have the presiding bishop here, Bishop David Copeland, to come up, say a prayer, and then right after the prayer, we'll have a moment of silence. Bishop Copeland.
On behalf of the New Creation Fellowship, we welcome you. Let's bow our heads. Anyone's death diminishes us all. Out of one blood comes all nations. So, Lord, we pray now that your original intent for love and understanding, community and relationship, that you will allow this time to be used to mend and to bind. We pray, Lord, for those in authority. We pray for those in our community. We pray, God, for leadership and those who follow. We pray for families, for mothers, for fathers, husbands, wives, children, neighbors. We ask, God, that this time be spent so that our future might be brighter. This, Lord, we do ask in your name. Amen. Shall we bow our head for just a moment of silence? And all the people said,
Thank you, Bishop Copeland. All right, so today we have a lot of esteemed individuals here, leaders of different organizations, public office, and they were gracious enough to come here so you can answer or ask any questions that you so wish, and they'll be here to try to restore and bring some healing to the community. So I'd like to introduce our panel first. Starting from our left, I'd like to introduce 4th Court of Appeals Justice Jason Pulliam. Sheriff for Bexar County, Sheriff Susan Pomerleau. Police Chief for the City of San Antonio, Chief William McManus. Senior Pastor for Faith Outreach Center International, also the founder of San Antonio in Black, White, and Brown, Pastor Charles Flowers. CEO for the National School Improvement Corporation, also the chairman for the San Antonio African American Summit, Dr. Ron Kelly. And of course, attorney here and also key member of SAGE, attorney William Cruz Shaw. We also have some dignitaries here. As I call your name, please stand to be recognized, and we'll hold applause to the end. Mayor of the City of Windcrest, Mayor Alan Baxter. Javier Salazar, San Antonio Police Department. He's running for Bexar County Sheriff. We have a sign-in sheet here, so bear with me. I'm just going to go through to ensure I don't leave anybody off. All right, I'd also like to call up now Celeste Brown from Congressman Lloyd Doggett's office. She has a statement to read on behalf of Congressman Doggett.
Hello, my name is Celeste Brown. I work as Congressman Lloyd Doggett's field representative here in San Antonio, and he has the following statement for me to share with you all. Dear Bishop Copeland, President Eric Moore, and church family, thank you for your important leadership. I join you in spirit for this important town hall to discuss coming together to address recent violence. Seeking justice where misconduct has occurred in no way lessens our commitment to fully supporting the many officers who risk their lives daily protecting our families. The brutal murders in Dallas and the tragic loss of officers today in Baton Rouge remind us of the dangers they face. Black lives do matter, and affirming that does not lessen our respect for the lives of others, nor does it in any way condone violence directed at law enforcement. Affirming that Black Lives Matter only recognizes that the reality that too often, in too many places in America, they have not mattered enough. Just as recent videos may not always give a complete picture of a particular violent incident, videos also only reflect only a few of the many violent incidents that have occurred. I disagree with those who are determined to widen division by placing all of us on one side or the other, against whomever they are placing all the blame. I believe that most folks strongly oppose all violence and are seeking justice, security, and respect. And in our community discussions, we must continue to raise the issue of so many guns. Guns that belong on the battlefield, not in our neighborhoods. Only this week, a new report indicates that while most of those who have been formally held responsible for domestic violence were denied a gun, Some 6,200 domestic abusers purchase guns because of loopholes in our own background checks requirements. We must strengthen gun safety laws. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25 tells us, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." And that scripture is what gatherings like this help to fulfill. In encouraging one another, we will be able to move forward together. Peace and blessings to all of you, and I look forward to hearing from you on these important issues. Congressman Lloyd Doggett.
Thank you, Celeste. We also have representatives from Congressman Joaquin Castro's office as well. Can you raise your hand? All right, thank you. As far as dignitaries, did I leave anybody off for dignitaries? If I did, please stand and state who you're with. We have City Councilman Ray Saldana. Welcome. All right, so next yes. The Mayor of Garden Ridge, welcome. All right, so next we'll quickly recognize the different organizations. Please hold applause to the end. When I call your organization, just please stand to be recognized. We have members from the NAACP here. Okay. We also have the area director for our Alpha Phi Alpha, Director Stephen Middleton, he's here. Our Vice President, Ricky Evans. We have members from our brother chapter, Pi Theta. We have the president of 100 Black Men, Dr. Milton Harris. And we also have members of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense of America. We have members from the Peace Initiative, which is putting an end to abuse. All right, and that is led by Patricia Castillo. Okay. We also have members from Telemundo, KSAT 12, Univision, San Antonio Police Department, NCCF, San Noir, and Idea Public Schools. Thank you so much for attending. East Side Blue Light Chapter is also here. LULAC. Thank you. All right. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Chairman of San Antonio Housing Authority. Delta Sigma Theta's here. Sigma Gamma Rho is here as well. Omega Psi Phi, Kappa Alpha Psi. Okay, Zeta Phi Beta. Iota Phi Theta. Anybody else? Community of Churches of Social Action. Harvard Community Cultural Center Board. Black Video News. All right, I don't know if I can pronounce that, but thank you. Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. Without Heroes? Gridiron Heroes, thank you, sir. All right, before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much. Yes. George Gervin Youth Center. Rich Ministries, thank you. All right. I want to say thank you before we jump to the panel and start asking questions. Bishop Copeland was nice enough to, I called him at the last minute. He allowed us to use his church, and then they also paid for the food that we can partake in afterwards. So I want to say thank you so much to him. This is a forum that we're going to talk key issues, hot issues. I implore everybody to have a lot of passion. However, I don't want this to turn into a negative debate or anger-filled fest. Okay, we all want to express ourselves, and I appreciate everybody showing up. So, but we also want to be respectful to everybody that's here. So, thank you for coming. Microphones in the audience, if you have questions, please step to the microphone. It doesn't matter if it's question time or not. If I ask one of the panel members something that's key, please step up, and then I'll acknowledge you. Just wait there till I acknowledge you. All right, we're looking to have this event under 2 hours. I know Chief McManus, sir, you have to leave in an hour. Okay, so Chief McManus has to leave, so we want to tackle the first issue, which is how to improve community relations between the police and the local community before he departs. So we definitely want to move things along, but please feel free to ask any questions you may have. And then lastly, bathrooms. If you have to use a bathroom, please exit out of those doors, hook a right, and those are the bathrooms right there. We want to continue the conversation afterwards, so please don't skedaddle right out of here. When you leave, just leave through that section right to the right, hook to the right, and then go right over where the atrium, the water fountain is. We're going to have food there. The reason why is because a lot of people won't be able to ask questions or hear themselves being answered, right? So we want to continue the fellowship and the conversation over food and refreshments, and we can hopefully gain some further understanding. So without further ado, I would like to start with Justice Pulliam, and we're going to go all the way down to the right. And Justice Pulliam, can you, in 60 seconds or less, just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit more about you?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Hi, my name is Jason Pulliam. I serve as a justice on the 4th Court of Appeals. It hears civil and criminal appeals for a 32-county region covering most of South Texas. We are located downtown on the 3rd floor of the Justice Center. I'm happy to be here. Thank you to Bishop Copeland, the New Creation family, Mr. Moore, Alpha Phi Alpha, and members of the community. I look forward to the rest of the discussion this afternoon.
And I'm Susan Pomerleau, the Sheriff of Bexar County. I came with a legacy of service as a daughter of a minister who was very much involved in community perspectives and developing those kinds of relationships and communications. Not just my professional experience, but I think more to the point, my personal experiences of being a survivor of family violence, of also being the sister of a brother who was bipolar before we even knew what that was in the 60s and 70s. And so those personal experiences, I think, have also shaped much of my experience and my understanding of the challenges that we deal with in our society today. And I'm looking forward to this dialogue, and I appreciate New Creation's Christian Fellowship for hosting this important conversation.
Thank you. My name is Bill McManus. I'm the Chief of San Antonio Police Department. I spent from 1975 till 2002 serving with the Washington, D.C. Police Department, Metropolitan Police Department. From there, I went to Dayton, Ohio, where I was police chief for a few years. From Dayton, Ohio, I went to Minneapolis, where I was police chief for a few years. And then finally down here, where I believe I was meant to be. I was recruited by the city of Dayton to be chief there because of the work that I had done in the community in Washington, D.C., and then on to Minneapolis for the same reason, and then down here for a multitude of reasons. But I am here for 10 years now and have worked for 10 years in the community and will continue to do so.
Pastor Charles Flowers, Senior Pastor of Faith Outreach Center International and the convener for San Antonio in Black, White, and Brown. It is a group of ministers and civic leaders and political leaders who are looking beyond the boundaries that would normally keep us divided, racial and political, causing us to focus in on the good for the community as it relates to all elements within that community, and are willing to lay down the sacrificial labor necessary to heal the wounds that so many of us are dealing with today. It is not a stretch for me to say that in many of the cases of people that are walking around, especially over the last 3 weeks, with the events that have transpired in our nation, it's almost a bewilderment. It's as if though no certainty is in the heart of the masses as to what direction to go to heal. All of us want to go heal, but maybe not specifically knowing how. That's why meetings like these and some that have been held prior to this are important to give us a pathway as a people toward healing.
Good afternoon or good evening. Can everybody hear me? Yes, we're good? Okay. My name is William Cruz Shaw. I'm a local attorney here in San Antonio. My office is located in the east side. We have a general practice. And what we try to do is provide affordable legal, not only education, but legal services to those in the community. It's one of those issues that we face on a day-to-day basis, making sure that individuals in our communities understand their legal rights, understand the legal process, and give them help when needed. My office takes a huge amount of pride in being involved in our community, not through just monetary donations, but spending time, mentoring, working with kids in the inner city schools, let them know that there's people out there who do care about them. So I'm really glad to be here. Brother Copeland, thank you for your services here, and I look forward to this discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ron Kelly. I'm currently the CEO of the National School Improvement Corporation, and it is a company that I got an idea to form while I was a school principal working with inner city kids, and just realized that we needed not only to create these individual super schools that are high achieving, but we needed to spread those philosophies and those strategies to all areas and not just have schools that are excellent in one area. So we started that with a small idea, and now we're one of the largest providers of staff development and mentoring for young African American males throughout the nation. So we work with hundreds of school districts, and we have several international publications we do, but just with a whole mission of education and producing high achieving young black males. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me start this off with the first question. I would like Chief McManus and Sheriff Pomelo to answer first and then open it up to the rest of the panel. We often hear about different perceptions, and it's so hard for someone to understand somebody else's perception. So this is a perception question. What is your current perception of police and community relations here in San Antonio?
I think here in San Antonio, as opposed to other cities, because I have that reference, that police community relations in large part is very, very good here in San Antonio. Black community, Hispanic community, white community, and the rest. I have marveled at the level of support here for police in this community, in large part. I mean, there are exceptions, but in large part, I marvel at the level of support here. It was that way before I got here. I think we've strengthened it to a degree in the last 10 years. Matter of fact, I know we have. Why is that? I can only speak to the last 10 years and to say that we have engaged the community at pretty much every level in the last 10 years. All of our policies, our guiding principles, they are all, our vision statement, our mission statement, all include community, compassion, integrity, fairness, respect, the guiding principles. Our vision statement, to be the best police department in the country with the help of the community. Same thing with the mission statement, with the help of community and allowing or including community as part of the leadership in the department.
And I would agree as well that on the most part, the relationship across this entire county is good. I've lived here 24 of the last 31 years. And what I've seen in a variety of roles is that we have it's not just elected leaders that are having the dialogue, it's community leaders, it's faith-based, it's our business leaders who are involved across the board. Strong grassroots support and involvement, not only in neighborhood associations, but associations across our community. I also believe that our military and the fact that many people who have served in the military come back to San Antonio, that also strengthens our diversity. So I think we have a strong foundation, but that's not to say that we don't have more that we can learn, things that we can change to get better and improve on those relationships for those who feel disenfranchised and feel that their voice is not being heard. And these kinds of conversations are very important, not just in these times where we feel the anguish and the sadness of losing people across our nation, but also continuing these conversations so that when those difficult times come, we already have those relationships and have the strength to present a face that represents all of the community.
Panel?
While I agree with the lion's share of what the sheriff and Chief McManus have said, we've been on panels and in discussions before at other places. I'm also aware of the fact that perception was the heart of your question, that given a people group, that perception may be different. The family of Marquise Jones and some other things that have happened right here in our own city. I totally agree with them in the fact that the tenor of support and a spirit of cooperation in San Antonio is much different than it would be, and it is in other cities. It's not to say, however, as the sheriff just alluded to, that we don't have our own cases that we need definitely to keep working on and talking through until there is a workable solution and agreement between the police department and the community. If you ask an Afro-American community, black community, what that relationship is like, you might get a little bit different answer than if you ask an Caucasian community about it. But the reason we're having these kinds of things is to get us all on the same page about that perception. One's experience can shape one's perception. So if you live in a neighborhood where there is exchange with the police a lot, your perception may be a bit different. Just an analogy, and I'll close with this. It's two young girls, two professionals, one white, one black, driving in a gated community, and they were thinking about partnership in a home and so forth. And they noticed in their driving that there was, through the community, that there were several patrol cars in the community. The Caucasian lady said, "Look, there's patrol, that we feel safe." And the African-American lady in the same car with us said, "That's not good." So the same issue perceived by two very different people, very differently, but it's in talking through, it's in meetings like this that helps us to get on the same page about those things.
Excuse me. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and came of age at the height of the crack cocaine epidemic that ravaged the inner city communities in the northeastern portion of our country for many years. And so you have to have support for our police officers who have to deal with the violence that's associated with the drug trade, as well as respecting the members of the community who live in those communities and need the services of the police. So we always have to balance and strike a balance between the need for and support of the police with rooting out the criminal element in our communities, as well as finding the right sort of tone and tenor and respect for the members of the community. I like to focus on, as Dr. King would say, the universal nature of our existence and our value and our worth. And I think our perceptions based on our experiences can at times get in the way of that, and we can't see each other for what we really are. And we're in a church today, and I think we need to all recognize we're all God's children, made in His image, and if we can see ourselves that way first, maybe we can get past some of the perception problems and maybe some of the fear that's associated with those perception issues, so that we can have a great interaction with law enforcement, and so that citizen and law enforcement encounters can end with both going home.
And I'm glad that Justice Pulliam brought up the concept of fear, because I work with young men almost on a daily basis in our inner city schools, and I've never had that fear of police, partly due to my father was a police officer, 25-year veteran of SAPD. So I grew up seeing the badge and seeing his fellow officers and how they support each other, and it was a foreign concept to me, that fear. But as I started to work with these young men, and I would see how they would respond, and I would see the extreme fear, and they just, comment to me, Dr. Kelly, we fear for our lives. Will we make it through the summer? I had one young man told me that as we met for our last mentoring meeting of the year, he said, will I make it through the summer? And when those type of things hit me, when I heard that and that hit me, I said, this is really something that's going to involve some type of joining of forces, with the community and the police officers getting to know these young men, with us having a presence in the community. So knowing that fear is out there, that's really what kind of should wake all of us up, because these young African-American males around, 16 to 18 years old on our east side, they see it as a war. They see it as like, they're going through a war right now, and they don't know if they're going to make it to the next day. So I think we need to look at those issues and address them and build that relationship so that there's some type of comfort between the two like that.
I'll seed this thought while he's getting his microphone. The last San Antonio Black, White, and Brown meeting that was held just last Tuesday, Chief McManus's assistant, Chief Flavin, and I talked about 12 to 29-year-old black males coming together for a time of being ready to both meet and partner with a person in uniform, black, white, or brown, that starts to break down the wall of distrust and sometimes anger between the two, and causing a sense of community to be strongly built between African American males in the police department. That pursuit is already underway. We're going to put some dates out and call for, our target is 500 in groups of 100 that can just keep working with law enforcement and in the community in such a way that it used to be this way in policing, as Chief is probably the most qualified at this table to tell us, that there was a time when a guy walked the beat and he knew everybody and everybody knew him. Dynamics have changed, but we don't have to lose the spirit of that Romans chapter 13 minister there is there under God's restriction, under God's commandment, for the judgment of them that do wicked and for the celebration of them that do good. So we're trying to recreate that circumstance by involving African American young males 12 to 29 with the police department.
Next question. What are specific actions that we can take on both sides, citizens and police, to improve our understanding and ultimately increase relations? Let me give you an example. Shaquille O'Neal. Everybody knows Shaq, right? He's a funny, lovable guy. Shaq is, I guess, a reserve sheriff. He's law enforcement. He stopped in a neighborhood one day, and it's on YouTube, and he decided to play basketball with one of some of the kids there. Now, everybody in the community, a lot of police officers showed up, and that meant the world to them because he was there, he was able to relate. And I guarantee you that probably changed or somewhat altered their perception of law enforcement. So what can we do as a community, both citizens and then also law enforcement, to help change those perceptions and increase the relationship?
There's an organization here in San Antonio, it's called United Communities of San Antonio, its precursor was the National Conference of Christians and Jews. Each summer, they have a camp. And we have a number of our deputies who volunteer for this camp as counselors and instructors. And during the week, they don't wear a uniform. And they gain the trust of young men and women in our neighborhood who are disadvantaged, come from areas where they don't have a lot of the benefits. And then at the end of the week, on Friday, they show up in uniform. And the first reactions are they're angry. We gave you our trust, but you didn't tell us who you were. But the point was, they didn't change. They're the same person they were when they were in civilian clothes as when they're in a uniform. And then the attitudes changed about recognizing that behind the uniform, as part of that person, that's who they are. And that has had a huge benefit in young people and families who have been able to be involved in these programs. It's not just Chief McManus and myself who need to be out front having these conversations. It's also our deputies. And I'll tell you that we have a number of black officers in the sheriff's office. Every single one that I've talked with have said that some of their friends are no longer their friends because they're now in law enforcement. They're called traitors. They're called Uncle Toms. I applauded Chief David Brown's comments last week, where he said to individuals who were protesting, if you want to do something, then come across this line and join the Dallas Police Department. We have to have, one of the most important things that we in law enforcement, or whether it was, when I was in the Air Force, leadership, in this case, law enforcement, needs to reflect the diversity of the community that we serve. And if young black men and women are unwilling to be part of law enforcement and to see that as an honorable profession, which it is, how are we going to have those among us to also represent the communities that believe they are underserved or under siege? And so we have to be willing not only to have the conversation, but also to see law enforcement is not the enemy. Law enforcement is here to serve and protect this community.
I grew up on the south side of Houston, and in our communities, we were scared of police officers. We were terrified, just from our own personal experiences. I can't name one individual that I grew up with that said, I'm going to be a police officer when I grow up. Because it's hard to say, you know what, if you want to change the system, be a part of the system. But if you see that system as the enemy, why don't I want to be a part of that system? There's a huge disconnect. So, and I understand the comments, I understand it. But we need to change mentalities. You need to change perception, but perception is such a gray word. What does that mean? What does that look like? And so from a community perspective, and it in a way it bothers me, but in a way it doesn't, because we're doing this, it always takes a national disaster or catastrophe or something big to bring us together this afternoon. These meetings should be held all the time. Once a young man is killed, once a young lady is killed, black, white, Latino, whatever, it's too late. We need to be talking with our neighbors, our community leaders. I'm not even saying politicians. I'm saying the true leaders of our communities are right here. Okay, the people who wake up every morning to take their kids to work, take their kids to school, the single parents. Get everybody involved in regaining ownership of our communities. That's where it starts. By the time it gets to the sheriff and SAPD, we're losing. We're losing. Once they get to the DA's office, we're losing. We need to make sure we get to them for that. How many of us go back to our neighborhoods where we grew up? I purposely live on the east side of San Antonio, right across the street from elementary school. I have a nice car. I'm not gonna, it's okay. I wear suits. Every morning, those kids see me walk out of my house, get into my car, in my suit, and go to work, and come home. Every morning. It's not anything huge, but it's creating a perception. And that's where we take control of this. That's where we take ownership of what needs to happen in our communities in terms of working with police officers.
May I also say that there is a responsibility that we have in terms of improving relationships between the community and the police department. It's a responsibility we have as families. The reason that law enforcement deals with a lot of the personalities they deal with is because there has been a breakdown in the family. Now, this is not the only reason. These two gentlemen talked about a real fear. When you have a guy that comes to you before school is out and he says, am I going to make it through the summer? That should rip your heart out. But as well as there are dynamics to deal with in that area, there's also the responsibility we have to make sure our families are structured in such a way that they teach order, discipline, a bright look at the future, responsible behavior. Those kind of things are not the job of the police department to instill into our children. Those are our jobs to instill into our children.
What I like to try to do is serve the community both at the courthouse and outside the courthouse. One of the ways we serve at the courthouse is we'll have opportunities for children, whether it's elementary school, middle school, or high school, to come in and tour the courthouse with me. We'll let them watch court. Before I was on the appellate court, I was a trial court judge. So I would let them see when individuals entered a plea of guilty or had a motion or had a trial. And then they got to see the consequences of those actions if the person was found guilty. And then I would talk with them afterwards. We'd have a briefing afterwards and communicate to them, well, see, this is how our system works. They got to see the fairness of the system rather than their perceptions of how the system might work or works. Their belief maybe that in all cases that the system is stacked against them. They got to see me on the bench making decisions, and all of that filters into their mindset. Even if it's not immediate, I think it has a lasting effect. Just as important, I have to get off the bench, take off the robe, and go into the community. So I go to speak at schools. Whenever I get an opportunity to provide mentorship or leadership, I try to take advantage of that opportunity and let folks know my story, that I'm a kid just like many of them from Brooklyn, broken home, grew up in a really tough neighborhood, first in my family to graduate college. I'm the first lawyer that I ever knew. I never met a lawyer until I passed the bar exam, or when I went to law school. But, I mean, I never met a lawyer. I know that sounds bizarre, and I served in the military. I tell folks it's okay to serve in the military. Not only is it okay, I encourage it. It's a way out of poverty and into the middle class. That used to be a way, either civil service or military service would catapult you from the lower rungs of society into the middle class, and then that next generation can go even further. So, but leaders, whether we're elected or unelected, community members must be engaged, must come out of their offices and go into the community and provide real leadership, as well as moral leadership. We have to tell folks what's right and what's wrong without qualification.
Okay. Thank you, panel. Before I turn it over to questions, might I suggest this, and this is my entrepreneurial mind at work. Oftentimes through government, we always try to market, right? Market ideas, share ideas through social media. But what today appeals to a lot of young folks is social media. They're on there all the time, right? Watching videos, funny clips. Might I suggest that you consider getting an outside entity, whether it's a marketing agency or what have you, to really encapsulate the message that you would want to share with the community, and then let them translate that into videos and social media and Twitter and all that stuff that young folks are on. Because I think that might be a better way to communicate with especially the younger population. Let me turn this over to the gentleman, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Tucker. I work for the San Antonio Observer newspaper. I want to, first of all, offer some thanks. First of all, thank you, Justice Pulliam, for reminding us about how important police officers were doing the crack cocaine epidemic. And the reason why they're so important is because here in San Antonio back in 2001, we had 10 police officers and Bexar County Sheriff's deputies that volunteered to protect cocaine shipments in this area. Also like to thank Mr. Lloyd Doggett's representative for bringing up the issue of domestic violence, because it turns out there's a lady by the name of Ms. Diane Wettendorf who has compiled the research that shows that 40% of the wives and children of police officers in this nation are victims of domestic violence. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Shaw, for bringing up the issue regarding the district attorney's office, because just recently the president of the NAACP has just come out in favor of abolishing the grand jury system. Why? Because of the perception that some people are above the law, like police officers and sheriff's deputies who shoot unarmed people. And so, and in prospering that perception, we can also be reminded that Sheriff Pamelo and 2 of her deputies, after Mr. Gilbert Flores was shot, they filed paperwork with the state concerning the incident, but failed to say that the man had his hands up in the air. That's very, very significant with regard to the perceptions. With regard to the shooting of Mr. Marquise Jones, he was shot in the back, okay? And the justification for it was that he supposedly had a gun, but the gun didn't have his fingerprints on it. And thank you, Chief McManus, for telling us something we had never heard before, which was that there was probably no fingerprints on it because it was a revolver. So the perception that we are getting is created, I believe, by the police and by sheriff's deputies who are committing crimes. Now, my question, therefore, is this. Whenever somebody that is unarmed, that person is shot, the first thing that is done is their criminal history is released. So I would like to know why we can't get the disciplinary file of the police officer who just shot him. Okay? My second question, I'm asking you if you're in favor of these policies. My second question would be, there's always a drug test done on the person that is shot instead of the police officer or the sheriff's deputy. So I'd like to also know if you would be in favor of making certain that all police officers and sheriff's deputies that are involved in shootings are drug tested immediately by an outside agency, an independent agency. Those are my 2 questions.
Thank you for that. One of the first questions that we get following an officer-involved shooting from the media is request for the disciplinary records of the officer who does the shooting. So that information is available, and we're more than ready to give it out whenever anybody asks for it.
Excuse me, can I just beg to differ? I know Mr. T.C. Calvert I was at a meeting with him before the Justice for All conference, and he was telling me how he had been stonewalled repeatedly trying to get access to disciplinary files of police officers.
Those disciplinary files are public record, and they're available through the Civil Service Commission. So I don't know who stonewalled them, but those records are available. If an officer is involved in a shooting and there is cause to believe that there may be drugs in that person's system, then we will test them. But if there is no indication that there's any type of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I mean, Chief, some people would feel that when he shot somebody that was unarmed, that might indicate that he might have been on drugs.
I'm sorry, you're saying, you just said that if there's an indication that he shot somebody who was unarmed,
Yes.
that would be an indication that there's drug use involved?
Yeah, could be.
Is that what, I'm sorry, I'm asking, is that what you said?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what I said. I said that some people would believe that when a police officer shoots somebody that's unarmed, that might be an indication that he was on drugs.
Well, that's not a standard that we would test somebody for. If
Well,
there's a lot. Let me finish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors that go into an officer's decision to use deadly force on the street. An officer's life feels that his life may be in danger, that someone else's life may be in danger, but because an officer may make a mistake and shoot someone who is unarmed, believing that they are armed, is not, in my mind, a reason that you would drug test somebody for.
But you would drug test a person that was shot.
We don't demand a drug test on
But
anyone that's shot.
that is the standard policy, Chief.
That is not a standard policy. That is not a standard policy,
That when
sir.
these shootings occur, the first thing that happens afterward is the individual is slandered in the media because he is, first of all, supposedly drug tested, and then his criminal record is made public. And we do not have the same type of treatment for police officers or sheriff's deputies when they are involved in these incidents. And that's the question. Would you support those? Would you support a change in those policies so that those things would become standard practice?
I would not support that unless there is a reason to believe, based on the officer's behavior, that he or she is under the influence of
And
drugs.
shooting somebody unarmed is not, that's not unreasonable behavior.
There are a lot of factors that go into an officer's decision to use deadly force.
Thank you.
Chief McManus, can I just ask if you can clarify something? So for me, I've been able to sit on both sides. I was federal law enforcement for 5 years. I worked with, city, state, county, different cases I had. So I've been through training. I've been through instances where I think many people assume when they hear somebody's unarmed and they were shot, it's automatic guilt towards law enforcement. Can you give a scenario to help illuminate, to the audience, what actions or what could, entail an officer to go ahead and shoot somebody if, the person's unarmed?
There's a standard, and some of you may know it, some of you may not. There's a standard that was set by the Supreme Court back in 1989 called the Graham versus Connor decision. That decision ruled that the use of deadly force or use of force by an officer has to be judged from a reasonable, objective standard of the officer's, what's going on in the officer's mind at the time, based on who he's arresting, what type of crime he's being arrested for, how much force or how much resistance is being given. And the decision further says that it is not to be judged by someone sitting in an armchair who wasn't there. It has to be judged by with an objectively reasonable standard from the officer's perspective who's involved in the situation. That is a Supreme Court decision back in 1989. That's what the standard is. Now, if an officer believes that someone is armed, and it turns out to be a set of keys, or it turns out to be a comb, or whatever, in that officer's mind, he or she fears for his or her life. And the use of force is justified in those situations most of the time. That's why we don't see officers being indicted for those types of shootings, because of the Graham versus Connor standard.
Sir, do you have a question that relates to
Let
what
me,
Chief just said? Okay.
make one comment on this. And this goes to a more practical issue, and that is the equipment and the tools that law enforcement have. There was a time when there were no body cameras. there was a time when deputies or officers didn't have tasers. And there are a lot of departments across the nation who don't have the privilege of the kind of support we have from our Commissioners Court and City Council in providing the kind of equipment that gives deputies and officers more choice in the tools that they use in keeping the peace. And I specifically go to the issue of whether it's a baton or an ASP, a taser, as opposed to the only option being a gun. And I think there are several cases across the country where that's been the case, where that officer didn't have any other option except a gun. And so I think it's important also to look at our situation here locally as compared to the tools, the training that other jurisdictions have, different from us.
Yeah, briefly, without weighing in on policy, because I'm a judge and I can't weigh in on policy because of the Code of Judicial Conduct, I will direct everyone's attention, and you can find it online with an easy search, Chapter 9 of the Texas Penal Code, which governs justification or self-defense issues, and then specifically Section 9.51, which gives you details and the law regarding when an officer may use deadly force. That's Section 9.51 Texas Penal Code.
Sir?
Ready?
Yep.
My name is Vicente Garcia. I'm with ISAE Promotoras de la Buena Salud. And part of the problem that we have today is what you're talking about. We have a justice system that has made it easy for the executive system to take advantage of whatever the guidelines may be. When this country was organized, the thinking was different. We have evolved into what we have today, and it is evil. We both know that, and the problem is that you have violated our constitutional rights. The law of the land indicates, under Amendment number 2, that the militia shall be armed, and the only reason for that is because the militia is us, the people. We are the people. We are the militia. We have the same rights that any police officer has. I would love to arrest the chief of police in case I found him doing something that he's not supposed to do. And I have that authority under the militia, under the Second Amendment, because it doesn't only cover the ability to own weapons, but to be able to enforce the law of the land, which you have violated already through many ways. Today, you're asking for cooperation from the community. Well, we are members in force. We are peace officers. You have to understand that, and you have to rectify that. The problem is that our systems, the justice system, law enforcement system, and all the other systems having to do with power over the citizens, which you think they are supposed to have become an industry. That's why we go from school to prison. It's a small job. That's why the state has that capacity to come into our homes and take our children. Because you think that, just like Justice Jason said a little while ago, we have a need for law enforcement. We are law enforcement. You're the one that have pushed us away and said, no, we'll take care of the problem. But the problem is that you have created greater problems than what we had before. If you will only acknowledge that we are part of you and you are part of us, and we move the corporations out of the way, which you are one, the city of San Antonio is no longer a city for the people. It is a corporation.
So, sir, what's your specific question for the panel?
My specific question is, are you willing to take on the challenge and be able to include the community as law enforcement so that we can take care of our own communities.
Yesterday morning, we were at Daily Bread Ministries for a community meeting. And there were a number of people who came to the podium and made the statement, we ask our law enforcement to do everything for us. And let me use this example as it relates to mental health. Across this nation and in the Bexar County Jail, 21% of everyone who is there has some level of diagnosed mental illness. In the 60s and the 70s, when my brother was in those mental institutions, there were 600,000 beds across this nation in mental institutions. Today, there are about 37,000. And jails and prisons have become de facto mental institutions because generally the first people that someone with mental illness deals with is someone in law enforcement. Fortunately, here in this city and this county, a number of years ago, that was recognized, and every single police officer and sheriff's deputy that is serving on the streets of this county is mandated to have 40 hours of crisis intervention training, which also includes de-escalation techniques, the ability to identify those who are in a psychological crisis or dealing with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, or even developmental issues such as autism. And today and last year, there were almost 10,000 times when law enforcement responded and did an emergency detention on someone with mental illness who was determined to be potentially a danger to themselves or others. So this is an issue that, besides community policing, besides being in the community, that we've been asked to deal with. The same thing as it relates to domestic violence, how we treat each other, is what has happened to our families and to our social structure that helps. What happens in our schools in terms of, when parents haven't been able to do the job that they're called on to do. It's probably the least training anyone gets is how to be a parent. And yet our schools are also asked to fill that void. And then when that void can't be filled, then that passes to law enforcement. And I can tell you that with my short time in law enforcement, I don't believe that I've known a group of people who are more dedicated to serving a community than those who serve in law enforcement. Because when they're asked to do something, they do it. And that's not to say that we don't have in our midst those who aren't as perfect as we would like them to be, or who don't break the law. I've held people accountable and we've filed charges on them. And so it's not that we are not taking care of those issues, it's law enforcement is asked to do an awful lot.
Let me just say right here, with reference to just kind of some parallelisms that help us perhaps see some of what's happening. As a pastor, many of us go about our pastoral duties doing the best we can for God's flock. Inevitably, somebody's going to stand up and read you the riot act for not doing your job sufficiently. As a business owner, you may bend over backwards to help a customer, but inevitably, somebody's going to come into your business establishment and tell you how shoddy it's run and all of those things. I want to remind us that what stands between the society and total lawlessness are the men and women sitting on this platform. Remove that element out, and that's not to say that everything works perfectly, because no pulpit works perfectly, no business, none of the rest of the analogies that I gave you. But remove that element out, we're back to the old West. We're back to a system of chaos. And there has to be respect for the people who put their lives on the line every day. I served in the military for 12 years. And put their lives on the line every day to help keep society cohesive as possible and keep order flowing and commend those that do good and are a punishment. I just turned to Romans chapter 13. It's kind of a hard verse to swallow in these times, but truth is not always palatable. Sometimes it's very difficult to swallow. And it says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against that authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Now, that's not always easy to take, especially when we deem that an authority is not operating perhaps as perfectly as we would like for it to. We have no quid pro quo in that verse. We still have the responsibility to honor and respect it. And while there needs to be questions and dialogue and things that need to change, should change, we should never forget that they're there standing between us and chaos.
I'd like to jump in on with the sheriff when she brought up the concept of training, because coming from the education side, that's the piece that I always see that is really missing in this whole relationship between the community and the police, starting with the police side regarding training. I always think back to a friend of mine who's in the special forces in the military, part of a real elite unit, and he always talks about how it's almost boring what he does because all they do is train all the time. Train. They never get any real action. But when they do have real action, they've trained so much to where the reaction time, they've seen the scenarios over and over to where they react exactly according to plan. And when I watch the police videos and I watch all of these incidents, you see a reaction, you see an emotional reaction, you see that. So I think if we go to training our officers more, I understand our officers have to be on the street. There's not enough people for officers to be in a training for a whole week or something like that, but some kind of way to work that training in so when these crisis situations happen, it happens according to plan. The other side, training our youth, our young black men. Going back to what I said earlier about the fear, instead of me discussing these incidents over and over with them and talking about all the bad and all the horrors and all the deaths, I start talking about training. Because they ask me, they say, Dr. Kelly, what do you do when the police pull you over? I said, I speak with a certain voice. Every other word that comes out of my mouth is sir, because I'm not looking at all of the conflicts between police. I'm looking at, in that officer's mind, he's just trying to make it home that night. And in my mind, guess what I'm thinking? I'm just trying to make it home that night. So if we train our young men, because these young men that I deal with, they wanna fight the power. They wanna, what can I do in this situation? How do I rebel against it? I say, you make it home. We'll take care of all of that other stuff later. We'll take care of that through the legal system. What was done is right and wrong and all of that. You do the right thing, but always understand, he's trying to make it home, and you better make sure you make it home so you live to fight another day. So training and looking at it intelligently and having our young men carry themselves a certain way, not to just be too easy with the system and not fight against things, but carry themselves in a way that's going to leave those opportunities open for them to live and for them to fight justice and be an attorney or a judge like some of the people on the panel today.
I think that's great to segue into the statistics I'm going to read. I'll turn over to the panel, and then, sir, I'll turn it over to you for a question. These are troubling statistics. After all the shootings, my mom, she lives in Orlando. She called me and was nervous, and you said, Lord Jesus, I'm praying, right? She was very nervous, but I think a lot of parents here are nervous, right? And I think this is part of the reason why. According to the Washington Post, black people are 2.5, so 2.5 times more likely than white Americans to be shot by police. Unarmed black Americans were 5 times more likely to be shot and killed by a police officer. So going back to training, agreed, we have to train our young folks or just citizens in general, but also police training, whether it's more so on de-escalation versus aggressive tactics or what have you. So my question to the panel, and then after the panel, I'll turn to you, sir, would be, in a car stop, somebody's speeding or they're pulled over for whatever reason, what are the things to do and what are the things not to do?
When a police officer pulls someone over for a traffic stop, they are typically, they're going to come into that stop, I'll say, in high alert. They don't know what to expect. And from the point where they understand that they're not endangered, then they can start to de-escalate. As far as the drivers go, if we can see your hands, we're feeling a lot more comfortable than if we can't see your hands. If we see people that are fidgeting around under the seat or leaning over, we're going to be concerned. The best thing someone can do, it doesn't matter what race they are, what ethnicity they are, let us see your hands, sit still, and just do as we ask. That's all there is to it, for the most part.
I'll give an example. I was in Wyoming, headed to a board meeting, and I had come in from Texas and was armed. And I'm driving from Denver to Laramie, and I was stopped by and I was speeding. And I noticed a black car coming up very fast behind me. And it was a Wyoming State Patrol. And when he came to the window, I had my hands on the steering wheel. I greeted him. He said that he had stopped me for speeding. And I said, I want you to know that I am armed. I have a concealed hand carry license. And my weapon is, and I told him where it was. And I said, if you'll allow me, I'll get my credentials and show you that I'm the sheriff of Bexar County in San Antonio. It's in letting people know what your situation is so that...
I think people are talking because you're the sheriff, so I think...
Yeah.
So it might be. I think they're saying it might be a little different interaction-wise.
Yeah, but he didn't know that until I
Sure,
told
exactly.
him
Yep.
that.
Yeah, he didn't know that until she actually notified him of that.
Yeah, and so it was. But whatever the case is, it's in showing that, as Chief McManus said, that you're not. There's not a suspicion about what you may be doing in order to reach for a weapon or whatever. But in showing, one, you're not a threat by your hands being visible, by turning the light on overhead so that the deputy or the police officer can see what is being done, and if someone has a concealed hand carry license, a license to carry, that's one, the license, insurance, and license to carry are ready to show that officer when they come to the window.
So I think just to sum that up, I mean, it might be a good thing if it's at night, turn the light on, take the keys out, put it on the dashboard, hands on the wheel, and just, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Okay. I also want to recognize District Attorney Nico LaHood. He's here. Welcome.
Thanks, guys. I no disrespect, Pastor. I had a 4-month-old and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old on me, and then they told me about this, so I just rushed over here. But with all due respect to the sheriff, she's a friend, but I've been pulled over, and I got my tattoos, and then if I'm coming from the gym, before I was known, before I was the DA, when I was a defense attorney, I've been pulled over before, and so I get the crooked eye. There's no doubt about it before, and all the advice is true. But I trained enough law enforcement in the past, and I've been involved in the law enforcement, the justice system enough to know if it's at nighttime, like they just said, turn the light on, hands always on the steering wheel. I always carry my driver's license somewhere where, as the chief said, I don't have to dig for it because they don't know what you're digging for, okay? And so I always keep it somewhere where I'm like this, I'm not moving, and I'm doing this number, just getting everything I need to get. And I have my license to carry. I said, hello, sir, and then, of course, and I'll tell you this, and not one officer should be afraid of this. Before there was body cams, I record the whole thing. And I used to tell my clients, record it. Police officers should not be worried about a video. A citizen shouldn't be worried about a video, because truth is truth, right? I mean, John 18:33-38, Jesus told Pilate, I came to testify to the truth. And John 8:31 says, through Jesus, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free, right? That applies to everybody. Law enforcement or citizen, by the way, that's consistency. And so then when they'd come in, I turned the light on. Hello, sir. Now, I started thinking about, well, what if I put my hands out the window? Then they're going to think I'm a felon. Then they're going to really look at me with a crooked eye. So I just said, I think a happy medium is going to be on the steering wheel with the lights on, with my driver's license here and my license to carry, and then just be super polite, and I'm recording it. That's me. I'm just being honest. I'm just telling you what I did. And as soon as they realize that you're thinking about their mindset, they don't let their guard off, but they ease down. They appreciate it. And even one time they gave me a warning and let me go. So that was a nice thing. So I agree with everything that everyone's saying. And I'm here for questions if you need me here too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I want to turn it over to this gentleman right here. Chief McManus, how much more time do we have with you, sir? Okay, thank you. So Chief's going to stay. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. So we're going to try to answer as many questions. Now, remember, we still have another subject we're going to talk about. So as the panel answers, please answer succinctly and to the point as possible, and then we can go through and answer as many questions. Sir.
All right. I'll make it quick because I'm super nervous. But I would like to thank everybody for coming, and I know that's pretty hard for the police officers. You guys didn't have to be here, and the rest of the panel, thank you for helping our community. Here's my son. He's 8 years old. His name is Preston Stephon Willis. And my biggest fear is him not coming home and passing away other than something that is natural. I have two people that I know. One is my nephew. He's 14 years old. He likes to play with guns, and he wants to become some type of authority that has a gun. And I know for a fact he has an anger problem. And I have a neighbor. Oh, yeah, by the way, my nephew's African American. So I have a neighbor who is white, who also has an anger problem. And he wants to become authority. I told my son, who Princeton, who one day also wanted to become an officer. And I told him, if your whole objective is not to serve and to protect, why do you want to become an officer? So my question to you guys is, when you encounter somebody in the police force who doesn't have the temperament to, that I feel like to carry a gun, what would you guys do? Okay.
He said that if you have an officer that doesn't have the temperament to carry a gun, what do you do?
What if you had an overzealous, because see, my nephew and both my neighbor, the white guy and the young black man, has a temperament, has a zeal, who just wants a gun and authority. What would you do if you had an officer who does not have the temperament to carry a weapon?
Kind of like a cowboy mentality.
Let me talk about first the requirements to get a Texas peace officer license. Not only is there a general knowledge test, not only is there a medical and physical fitness test, there's also a requirement for a psychological test, and they use a version of the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory to make those determinations. We also, in the sheriff's office, when someone comes to apply, whether they have a Texas peace officer's license already or not, also require a polygraph. And these are issues that, we believe and we hope identify those kinds of issues that would make someone unsuitable to serve in law enforcement. That doesn't say that throughout one's career in law enforcement, they may not deal with issues that may make them angry or, and I'd use the example, there's not one profession in the United States that has higher levels, higher rates of suicide, divorce, family violence, cardiovascular disease, stress-related disease than law enforcement. And I think the San Antonio Police Department is blessed by the fact that they have, I think, 2 or 3 full-time, on-staff psychologists. We've been able to get one part-time and also add to that additional capability. But those are issues that I believe we need to take care of the wellness of our deputies and police officers and those in law enforcement to address those kinds of needs, because they have that need just as much because of the issues that they deal with every day. And if we have a situation where that comes forward, we work with that individual, require some interaction so that they get the help to deal with those kinds of issues if we see them, even if they haven't affected their job.
And just to caveat on that really quick, if an incident happens like they do around the U.S., and it comes up where somebody's administratively been disciplined before but still on the job, do you guys internally strike a process where you go through people's files to ensure that no one from either the sheriff's department or PD has that same type of file? Meaning, like, they've been disciplined, they've had bad interactions time and time again with the local population. Do you guys do an internal scrub when that happens to make sure that that's not in your departments?
In our internal affairs unit, we have a computer program that flags officers when certain things happen. Their names pop up. They're referred to what we call the Officer Concern Program. It's a panel of officers who determine, make a recommendation to the chief's office, to me, as to whether or not this officer should be referred to a psychologist, to an alcohol program, whatever it may be. So we do have a system in place where officers are flagged if they get so many complaints within a certain period of time. Or could be one complaint for a certain serious thing.
Thank you.
All right, we'll turn it over, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Cassandra Littlejohn, as a mother of a 25-year-old black male who's tatted up, and when I called him to inform him on just safety when he's out in the community, he was just totally dumbfounded. Mom, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not doing anything. I said, you don't have to be doing anything. Just practice these things. And so, and as a daughter of a black father who, while I was sitting in the driver's seat, witnessed the police brutality for no reason at all. And as a female, while driving, while black, here in Texas, experienced the harassment for no reason at all of 6 police cars who stopped us in the middle of the night, 2 black females, demanded that we get out of the car for no reason. I'm concerned and I'm frustrated. However, having said that, I understand that I can be frustrated and I can be angry, but as a Christian, the Bible tells me to not be sinful. I'm thankful to be in San Antonio, where I think we have excellent leadership in our police chief. I think we have excellent leadership in our DA. What I'm concerned with, however, is the laws and the practices that, or the practices which govern those laws, or the laws which govern, you know what I'm trying to say, in that where we have a grand jury process, and I hope that DA LaHood would speak to this and the concerns there with that process, and I think this is part of the anger and the frustration, in that when officers, in which we see the videos and we know that there's more to the story than we see, but we see the obvious. And we know that this is bad police practice. We know there was no justification for some of these shootings, but yet time after time after time again, we hear the no bill come back. And so I think it's important to us in this room to, one, understand that grand jury process and what we have to do, not with these guys up here, but what we have to do in Austin to begin to change the laws as it pertains to those practices. And that's why it's important to vote, because where they're doing their job on one hand in upholding the law, when it comes to when something goes to the DA and he presents it to the grand jury and the outcome isn't what we thought it would be, we become angry, but how we direct that anger is what's important. That's the next step for us, is not being frustrated and angry at the people on this stage or the people in law enforcement, but it's how we take that action and move it into changing legislature and making sure that the laws that are in place represent the issues that we're dealing with today. And so if the chief would speak to...
Yeah, if you can...
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
okay.
If the chief and DA would speak to, one, the change in police practice that I know that we have in place today and how that's been implemented on the street, and also if the DA would speak to the grand jury process and some, I know that he has a new initiative that he's put out to address some of the concerns in this room.
Sure, and I'll be quick because I know that Nico will explain very well the question about the grand jury process, so I want to give him plenty of time. But let me just give you an example of some of the changes that we've made over the years. And we started talking about change and reform years before this national discussion even started. We started back in 2007, and there were a number of things in 2007, 2008, 2010, 2013. I mean, just some major changes within the police department. When the President's 21st Century Task Force on Police Reform was finished in May, we looked at it, we started looking at it in November when I got back from my little sabbatical. We started looking at it in November. There were 76 recommendations in that task force report. There were 6 sections in that report. We put 6 committees together comprised of citizens and police to review the inventory of recommendations to see how we conform to those 76 recommendations. We put together a document to show that we meet or exceed 66 of those 76 recommendations for improvement. There were 6 recommendations that we met, that we conformed to at least to some degree. And there were 4 that we didn't, and they had contractual implications. We were invited to the White House. The San Antonio Police Department was invited to the White House about 2 months ago, one of 14 other police departments, because of the reform efforts, the change efforts, the continuous improvement efforts that we have made over the years. They held us up as an example police department. On the 28th and the 29th of this month, The White House representatives will be here in San Antonio to further those recommendations, to assist us in furthering those improvements. So for the past 10 years, we have been moving down the trail of continuous improvement in all areas. I'll give you an example. There was a comment I wanted to make earlier, but I didn't get a chance. In 2015, we gave a block of training to every person in the police department on justice-based policing. We changed our approach in the academy from ask, tell, make to listen, explain with equity and dignity. We have made those changes to improve our relationships with the community. That's all that they had to do with transparency and improving relationships within the community.
Thanks, Chief. The grand jury process, we have 2 grand juries that go on all the time. Sorry, is that Jesus looking at me? 2 grand juries going on at all time. We have a Monday, Tuesday grand jury. We have a Wednesday, Thursday grand jury. I don't mean to give you my back, folks. I'm sorry. A Wednesday, Thursday grand jury. Now, they serve for 2 months at a time. One misconception is that the grand jury works for the DA's office. They do not. They work for the district court judges, and they rotate that responsibility. The district court judge swears them in, chooses the alternate. If an alternate has to be assigned and someone has to be released for some reason, that's the district court judge's job. We have no authority over that. Our job is to present evidence to them and to answer their questions and get them what they ask us to get them. That's it. We're not in there during deliberations. That's up to them. We don't even know what they deliberate about, or they don't have to tell us anything, by the way. There's 12 members on a grand jury. It takes 9 out of the 12 to have a quorum. So you have to have 9 out of the 12 to come back with what we call a true bill. That is a legal term, a true bill. You do not need 9 out of 12 to not indict. When someone says no bill, Cassandra, and I know you don't mean it this way, this is everyday talking, that's not a legal term. No bill is not a legal term. That's just that everyday common folk talk. All of us talk that way. Either you indict or you don't indict. You don't need 9 out of 12 to not indict. Let me give you an example. Let's say these 12 are here. We're all part of the grand jury. We present, we walk out. 8 out of the 12 vote to indict, true bill. 4 of them say no. What do you think that is? An indictment or no indictment? It's no indictment. A lot of people are bothered by that. So you're telling me, Nico, that 8 out of 12 people can say we want to indict this person and it's a no bill? Yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. That's exactly what the law is. I don't make up the law. We just have to enforce it, right? So as Cassandra said, if someone doesn't like that, then they have to talk to our legislator to change that. And so that doesn't get enough airtime. People don't understand, how can a grand jury, it's not a unanimous decision. Once someone has been indicted and you end up in a pettit jury, in a court of law, in a district court 12, in a county court 6 people will look at your case. It needs to be unanimous. If it's not unanimous, it's called a hung jury, and we do it again, possibly, unless something goes wrong with the evidence and it could be dismissed or pled out or something. You do not need unanimous decision in the grand jury process. Now, let me, second part of this. Who's heard that you can indict a ham sandwich? Right? The reason why they say that is because the DA absolutely decides what evidence to present to a grand jury. I'm telling you right now, if your case comes to me, I can indict you if I want to. Now, just because I can, that doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's moral, doesn't even mean it's legal, but I can do it. And just because it's permissible doesn't mean it's beneficial, right? Scripture tells us. And so previously, I'm not here to badger or hurt anybody, hey, Michael, how you doing? And I'm not here to badger my predecessor or anything like that, but it wasn't done that way. The new culture in this office is to present everything. If it's in our file, we present it to a grand jury, period. Every officer-involved shooting has been handled the same exact way. Both of them up there, the chief and the sheriff, know I have 0 issue indicting a police officer. We have 61 maybe now, 61 cases open on law enforcement officers in our area, in Bexar County. That doesn't get any press, right? Because maybe some of the cases aren't sexy enough. It doesn't matter. I don't worry about sexy cases. I worry about justice and worry about good cases. God is a God of justice, right? My oath is to seek justice. That's my legal oath under the penal code, to seek it, to go look for it, not to wait for it to come to me. Micah 6:8 says what? What does the Lord ask of you? But to seek justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. This is easy for me. It's not hard for me to seek justice. Proverbs 17:15 says what? To convict the innocent or to acquit the guilty, God detests them both. So what does that mean? God wants us to get it right. I'm trying not to cuss, Pastor, so I'm gonna try to keep it real PG here. I caught myself. I'm not gonna cuss. Come on, I'm gonna take an offering for the bishop. Don't let me preach. I got a sermon I'll give right now. So it's part of my spiritual DNA, justice. I don't care about politics. Anyone that knows me, I am not a political creature. I'm a Jesus-crat. That's number one. And I'll say that to a group of atheists. I'll say it to, I don't care what cameras are here. I'll say it again. And if I lose an election, I'll still be a husband. I'll still be a daddy. I'll still be a child of God. I don't need to be the DA. And so this office is focused on justice because that's our oath. And it means something in this office now. And everyone knows in my office it says do what's right, not what's easy. Because what's easy is what? It's easy. Anybody can do it. Right? What's tough is you will stand alone, and I'm fine standing alone. Now, here's what the Penal Code says also under Chapter 22. Not just me, any DA cannot tell you what we present to a grand jury. We can't, because we want that secrecy. And so I can't say what we present. I can talk about evidence in general. I can't say what we presented to a grand jury. If you don't like that rule, because trust me, anyone that knows me also, all you gotta do is spend 2 minutes on my Facebook. I'm transparent. I don't hold anything. I'm consistent. I try to be consistent. I'm not perfect, I promise you. And I try to be transparent as the law allows me, period. I got nothing to hide because I stand on truth, period. But, ma'am? Now, you wouldn't cut me off. I got here later, but I was talking all crazy, Barbara. What's wrong with you? And so, see, I'm teasing. She knows I love her. I'll stop. But so that's just it. And I'll answer any question you want. That's the way the law, that's the way this office runs. That's the way the grand jury process is legally and our oath. So we present everything, whatever's in the file in this office now.
So if I understand that correctly, if an officer is indicted,
yes, sir,
goes to the grand jury.
Well, he wouldn't be indicted yet. The grand jury indicts him.
But it goes to the grand jury.
Okay.
If it's not unanimous at the grand jury, then that means
you have to have 9 out of 12. You have to have 9 out of those 12 say yes for a true bill. So look, I'm the foreman, right, of the grand jury. And then say, Mr. or Madam or Mr. Secretary, please take a vote. Vote, true bill, no, yes, no, yes, no. At the end of it all, if it's 7-5, 8-4, anything less than 9 is a no bill by operation of law. There's no indictment.
Is that just in Texas or is that across the board?
I mean, every state is similar. I definitely don't want to speak for other states. I will tell you all the way across Texas. That's the way it is here.
So nationally, when we see these kind of things happening with police and they're able not to be indicted, that's a strong possibility of the process?
The time that I've talked on other cases around the state, I've done my homework because I don't want to look like a fool. And so every state that I've spoken about has a similar grand jury process. Barbara, you know I love you, right? I was teasing you.
And real quick, with that grand jury process, there's not a defense attorney. So the individual who's been charged with the crime, he is not represented. He's not even there. Okay, and I think that's real important to remember. That individual is not there, and he has no legal representation.
But understand why theoretically the way it's set up is a grand jury is supposed to analyze under probable cause, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Just look at Baltimore. I don't know the evidence. I wasn't there. I'm not the DA. I'm not playing Monday night quarterback, I promise you. But all 6 of those officers were indicted within 10 days. It's very fast in my humble opinion, okay, as a colleague. And then now we have 2 acquittals and 1 hung jury. Now what's going on? Why? I mean, that's why I'm saying it's, and there's things that happen after there's maybe not an indictment that we still can't talk about some of the evidence. Maybe there's a civil case pending, maybe something's happening to where you don't get all the facts. All I ask people to do always is, regardless of the case, pause, don't react, respond, and wait for all the assessment, wait for that due process, and then make a decision, right? Because God wants us to get it right, and we should want the system, quote unquote, to get it right as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sheriff?
and Nico, could you make this clarification, and you just brought it up, is often you have both a criminal case and a civil case. And in order for one not to be tainted by the other, information in the criminal case may not be released until it is resolved and then passed on to for civil.
Very quickly, please.
Yes, sir. Every DA runs the office differently. The practice in our office is we don't release any evidence if there's an investigation, and I've been consistent about that. I don't want cases ruled in the court of public opinion. It's not right. I wouldn't do it for you. I'm not going to do it for an officer. I'm going to be consistent. An officer doesn't get a pass, but they should be treated the same, not worse and not better, the same. And so we don't let any information out when there's a case pending or an investigation pending. Then at the right time, as you've seen, I'll release everything that I can under law. So that's correct. The office doesn't release it.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to have two more really quick questions. So I'm going to go here first and then there first. Remember, these are questions, so no long monologues. And then the panel, if you can just answer very directly. Sir.
Yes, my question is pretty simple, and I'm going to address it to uniformed personnel. I'm a retired soldier, so I have almost 30 years of service. And the biggest thing is training. What I don't understand, and I would like you to try, you can't speak for your service, I guess for everyone else, but explain to me why police officers are not trained to shoot to disable. As a combat soldier, when the enemy raises his or her hand, I can no longer engage him as an enemy. I have to subdue him. Explain to me why police officers the nation over shoot to kill and not shoot to disable. I look for your answer.
Good question, thank you. Police officers are not trained to shoot to kill. No, listen to me. They are not trained to shoot to kill. On TV, you see police officers shooting guns out of people's hands. You see them shooting light bulbs out. That's not reality. Police officers are taught to shoot for center mass, okay? Center mass is right here. And the reason they're taught to shoot center mass is because it lowers the margin of error when your life is in danger. Because police officers are only allowed to shoot when they believe theirs or a third party's life is in danger. So if I try to shoot you in the arm, my margin for error is really, really great. If I try to shoot you in the leg, my margin for error is really, really great. So police officers are taught to shoot where the margin of error is the least, and that is center mass. It is not shoot to kill. There has never been a word uttered in a training class, shoot to kill.
Sir, if I might add, so I'm gonna be a little bit more specific with you. Weapons is what I did for 30 years. Shooting is what I did for 30 years. And I understand center mass, unlike a lot of folks here. I also understand the term double tap, center mass between the eyes. So I understand that. But I will say this, as you were talking about training, is it not feasible to relook at what you're doing in your academy and maybe spend some money and some more time then to shoot differently? Because every time you face a civilian, the person you're there to protect and serve, you should consider you cannot take that bullet back. Because once that bullet is gone, something dies. And so I taught soldiers the world over to think, yes, we are in that blink of an eye. I have an 18-year-old that is given a big gun, and he has 3 seconds to determine if the person who just shot at him is a little boy, a little girl, a real enemy, or just somebody celebrating because their culture says shoot the gun in the air.
Sir,
so in 3 seconds, I have an 18-year-old make a decision. I'm just saying training.
We appreciate you. Thank you. All right, we're going to turn it over to this gentleman right here. After he's finished asking a quick question, we're going to transition to the second topic, sir.
I'm glad, I'm honored that everybody's here today. I am community. I truly do support and believe in community. I have 2 and maybe 2.5 questions. Okay.
Well,
So
we're
I
going to
heard-
get to one. And
I-
the purpose of, like I said, food will be right after, right across. And so we encourage everybody to stay because they already paid for all this food. So stay, eat, continue to talk, and ask questions. So I'll give you one quick question. Go ahead, sir.
So I know that there are a lot of parents here. And I notice, I look around the room, not that I'm counting, but I notice that there are a lot of black parents in here. And I noticed that this forum and this community meeting is gathered around law officials and African American community because that's what the media has been blaring at us. And a lot of us are overwhelmed with all of the presence in the media of black men being killed. I am personally. But here's the way I see things. I see this country, over the era of this country, black people have been being trained for a very long time. That's the way I see things. As a young man, as a young up-and-coming man who is gauging his opportunity and looking over things and just kind of seeing where I'm going, we have been being trained for a very long time. When your child gets an F in math, do you take your child to be tutored in every area of subject? Or do you have your child tutored in math? You have your child tutored in math.
Sir, what's your
So
question?
there is, what I see is there is a problem. There is a problem as far as training goes with the police force nationwide in the African American community. So my first question is, what is San Antonio doing? What is the state of Texas doing to address the problem or the potential problem that law enforcement are having with the black community, not just the entire community in general, because that's not where the F is. The F in the eyes of the American citizens to the police forces across the nation is with the black community. So are you gonna tutor that problem? My question to you guys is, how are you gonna address the problem that police forces are having with the African American communities? Address the F is what I'm saying.
We got you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
that's
it. Okay.
You might recall me earlier saying tonight about the police department's flexibility and willingness to work with us with African American males between age 12 and 29. And a lot has been said about training today. I'm glad I'm here because there's some partnerships that can really put the right people with that group of males 12 to 29 years old and train both on the African American male side and on the police department side. And they're both willing to do so. And I think that is a step in the right direction.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to transition to the next topic. If you guys have questions about gun violence, you'll be more than happy or welcome to ask those questions. So now we're going to introduce Miss Lisa Epstein as she comes up. She can sit right there. Guys, if you want to just scoot to your right and just make some room. And then Chief, can you lift up your nameplate? Her nameplate is right under yours, and just pass that down, please. All right, so as we know, this kind of goes hand in hand between, community relations, police, and then gun violence as well. And that's one of the other things and topics within San Antonio epidemic that we've been facing, of course, also across the United States. So I want to introduce to you guys the Texas chapter lead for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Ms. Lisa Epstein. Ms. Epstein, can you help us understand currently the epidemic and give us a little statistics to kind of put it in a picture of what's going on here in America?
Yes, certainly. First of all, thank you all for having us here today. This is an amazing gathering, and the fact that we're all here is an amazing step. We do have a gun problem in this country. There are 91 people killed every day in this country by gun violence, and as someone mentioned, we like to get upset and we like to get together when we hear the big news stories of the huge mass shootings, but this is something that's day in, day out, every single day in our country. Moms Demand Action is a group of over 3.5 million supporters in this country and growing, and we are trying to work with our lawmakers and hold our lawmakers accountable for what is happening in this country. People in this country are 25 times more likely to be killed by guns in similar rich nations with similar cultures who are exposed to the same TV shows, the same amount of mental illness as we have. So we do have a problem. Moms Demand Action does a lot of research, And what we found is that background checks are really the number one way we could cut down some of these gun violence numbers. Of course, there are lots of ways, there's lots of approaches. There are many, many more laws that we could talk about. But if we could close the loopholes on the background check system in this country, we could cut down the gun violence quite a bit. So to explain what that means, when you buy a gun in this country, if you buy it from a federally licensed dealer, so if you go into a gun shop, you have to have a background check. If you're a convicted felon, or if you're a domestic abuser, or if there is a warrant out, any number of things, if you're severely mentally ill, you won't be denied the right to buy a gun. Now, unfortunately, 40% of the gun sales don't happen in these situations at a gun shop. 40% of the gun sales are happening over the internet and armslist.com. They're happening private sales. They're happening at gun shows in our communities. And you can buy a gun, no questions asked. You can buy any type of gun. You can buy automatic weapons. You can buy handguns. You can buy any amount of ammunition that you want to buy, any number of guns. So closing those loopholes would really go a long way. And in states that have closed the loopholes, some states have taken the next step, 18 states, to close the loopholes, gun violence has gone down. Gun violence against police officers has gone down by 48%. Gun violence against women in domestic violence situations has gone down by 46%. Gun trafficking has gone down by 48%. So we know that these laws work. So we to try that will help, and we work at a national, we work at local.
Hold on, Lisa, your mic went out. So she was saying that they've been working with state, local legislatures. She's obviously worked with Congressman Doggett to get things passed as well. So as they're fixing your mic, let me expand a little bit on the statistics that you read. Every day, 7 children and teens die from gun violence. 41 children and teens are shot and survive. On average, in 1 year, 2,677 kids die from gun violence. 14,822 kids survive gun injuries. That's annually. So I would like to pose a question to the panel, and then I'll open it up to you, ma'am, and then you, sir, if you have questions specifically regarding this topic. The question is, what steps can we take from a law enforcement, legal, and community perspective to decrease gun violence?
First thing I would like to address is the piece of that many of us overlook. We start looking at the law, we start looking at the police, but what about changing the culture of our young men that are carrying these guns? And a lot of us, we're way on the north side, somewhere far removed from an inner city environment. We don't understand the presence of guns. And I'm going to go as far as saying right here in San Antonio, we might not understand, because my company works with school districts all over, and I had a chance to spend some time in Chicago. And many of you are familiar with all of the stories and incidents coming out of Chicago. And when I speak to a big group, it was a group of about 900 kids or so. I usually don't have time to talk to kids individually, but the principal of the school pulled me aside and said, can you talk to this one young man? I know you're on the go, you normally don't do this. Can you pull him aside and just talk to him for a minute? And I was like, well, I gotta catch my flight, I gotta go. What's the concern, what's the issue? He said, well, he's in the 9th grade, he's 15 years old, and he has 3 children, the 9th grade. I was like, wow. I said, yeah, I'm gonna stop everything I'm doing. I'm gonna sit down with this young man. And as he sat down, we're there in the school. As he sat down, I saw this bulge in his pants. As he's sitting there, and he was kind of uncomfortable. I said, do you need to stand, or what is that? What's going on? And he said, that's my piece. I said, your piece? We're in a school right now. In Texas, you do that, I'm going to tackle you and go get the officer, and everything is panic. But these kids in this inner city Chicago environment were carrying guns almost openly to school. And his comment was, that's a part of my outfit. Said, being in Chicago, carrying this 9mm, that's a part of my outfit every day. So that's where we start. If we start by changing that mentality, and one of the questions he asked me, he said, "You really wear a suit every day? How do you do that?" I said, "Man, this is comfortable. You just get your collar right and wear the right kind. It's not uncomfortable to wear that." And he began to be interested in my suit and how I could actually wear that every day. So if all of these successful men that are in this audience today, if we make ourselves known and we get into the community and we show them that, hey, I don't have to carry a gun every day. You know, I'm protected by what I do and what I believe in, by being in this church, you know, by my beliefs. Just changing the culture and changing the mentality, because it's a crisis out here, y'all.
One of the aspects of making sure that guns are not in the hands of those who should not have them. The Virginia Tech shooting was a young man who had been determined to be mentally ill and a danger to others. Yet that information was in the state database for Virginia, but had not been uploaded to the federal database. Had that been done when that young man walked in to buy a gun, he would not have been able to purchase that gun. Part of Senator Cornyn's legislation on the Mental Health and Secure Communities Act includes a provision that incentivizes states to upload that data to national databases so that we can facilitate keeping guns out of the hands of those who should not have them. So it's a multi-pronged issue, and yes, a lot of this are the laws that we have and encouraging our legislators to support legislation that will help this kind of situation.
Anybody else on the panel? Okay, so by my watch, we have about 25 minutes left. So we want to get to as many questions as possible. So ma'am, let me turn it over to you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Vilma Caesar. I'm a dentist. I practice 15 years here in San Antonio. I have two grown sons, 25 and 26, and they insist and they feel that I need to buy a gun and have a gun, and I say I don't need a gun. I live in San Antonio and I have a great police department. I don't need a gun. I am concerned about them. They have guns and they have permits to carry them. This last couple of weeks, my life has changed because of all these things that are happening. And I learned that one of my nephews that I love had been mistreated by police when he was stopped. My question to him was, did you file a report? Did you complain the next day? And he's like, Tia is auntie in Spanish. This has happened to me so many times that.
So ma'am, what's your question for the panel?
My question is, what's a practical thing that we can take out of this panel tonight that I can tell my sons or my nephew, or I can put on Facebook, listen, if you feel that you're unfairly treated by police officers, what can I do? What do you do? Put in a complaint, send an email, practical that we can start doing tomorrow. Thank you.
I know it kind of goes back a little bit, but if you can answer that very quickly, ma'am, and then we'll go on.
Whenever an individual has a complaint against any deputy, they can come to our Professional Standards and Integrity Office, or some call it Internal Affairs. We want to hear about that, because if we have a deputy, or when there's a deputy that has not treated an individual appropriately, or they think something has been done wrong, we want to know that so that we can look into that.
Can this be done online? Can this complaint be presented online, or do they have to physically go or write a letter or call? Because today's world is online.
If they are making a complaint that we need to investigate, we need them to come in and sign a statement.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, sir, we'll turn it over to you. Is this question regarding gun violence?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In regards to gun violence, to those individuals in law enforcement, 590 people have been killed by law enforcement to date. 160 of those killed are African Americans. Gun violence. The question is, are law enforcement officials above the law due to gun violence being rampant not only in our communities, civilian against civilian, however you want to pair it, black on black, white on white, but gun violence at the hands of law enforcement? How are officers held accountable, or are they not, and are they above the law?
The simple answer to the question is no, they're not above the law, and whenever there's a shooting involving a police officer, it's investigated by an officer-involved shooting team. That team is comprised of homicide investigators and internal affairs investigators. There's a two-part investigation. One's criminal, one's administrative. Criminal part is for violation of any of the state's laws. That goes over for an independent review to the DA's office. The administrative review is for any administrative policies that may not have been adhered to. Once that administrative investigation is complete, it goes to a panel of citizens and police. They make a determination or recommendation to me as to whether or not that shooting was justified. If it was not justified, there's a penalty phase, if you want to call it that. So there's parallel investigations, one for the DA, one for myself, and if there's any wrongdoing, the officers are appropriately disciplined.
Okay. Sir, you have a question, gun violence?
Well, yes, I do.
Can I
My
chime
name
in
is
on that?
George
I'm sorry,
Ponce.
I'm sorry, Justice Pulliam.
And part of what the other, maybe the civil component of the young man's question that the district attorney spoke about that may take place later. 42, section 1983, it's called a 1983 action. That's when someone can bring a private claim, we call it a cause of action in the law, alleging a violation of their constitutional rights. And so that's a federal civil rights claim under Title 42, Section 1983, that usually dovetails or follows any criminal or administrative investigation into a case.
All right, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Gerard Ponce, and I was a court administrator, or the chief county court administrator some years back, and during that time I had a gun pulled to my head by a police officer. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here about resolutions. I think that we need to find out how we can get into the community to make sure that a lot of those type of issues are prevented. So my question is for Attorney Cruz, since he says he's involved in the community, being attorney. I would like to ask him if he has any advice for all of these different community groups. I think I heard over 20 different people say they were with the group. If there's any advice that you
Of you vote, and how many of you know who you vote for, and how many of you know what the people you vote for, and hold them accountable, and pick up the phone and call them and say, why didn't you vote this way? Or this is something I care about and our community needs. Why aren't you voting for what's important for us? And guess what? When that person comes up for election again, you don't need to vote for them. Vote for the other guy and find out where the other guy stands. So it's very important to find people like this who will stand up for your community and be an active participant in the legislative process and continue that conversation even beyond your vote.
Thank you.
If I could wave a magic wand, we'd put God back in school, God back in government. 1962, the Supreme Court said no more biblical principles in school, and you look at the statistics from empirical data and all the stats, everything that the good justice said is because since 1962 to now, you look at that. Yesterday, and I've seen Barbara's work, I'm not trying to make her feel good. You can offer opportunity all you want, but if you don't change a person's heart, it doesn't matter what opportunities you give to them. Yesterday, some Pastor Beamer and Pastor Flowers, other pastors, and the city put on Serve 210. It was the first of many of them. We were there handing out food, cutting grass on the east side. Ran into this little boy in this one apartment complex. And we said, do you know anybody that wants some food, Papa? And he goes, yes, sir, I do. I said, what? You said, yes, sir? He said, where's your mama? Yes, sir, over here. Yes, sir. He yes, sir'd me. I went to his mama and I said, thank you for raising your boy. So, I mean, he was so polite. I mean, he won me over. This guy could have been a mass murderer. He would have got me because he won me over with his manners and his demeanor. And so if he was given an opportunity, I have zero doubt that he would take it. So we got to change people's hearts. It's always about the heart and that desire. I believe the good doctor's right. I believe everyone's right, Pastor Flowers, but it's always about the heart, or the opportunities don't matter.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, really quickly, after Brother Foster gives you the mic.
An old lady who's come to speak, but I'm an old lady that was a civil rights worker in 1966, and I'm tired of talking in circles about problems. The whole issue around guns is a false issue. The real issue is the pockets of poverty that exist in this country, and they exist because of white skin privilege. Until this country comes to grips with that, we will not deal with the gun problem. And so I would like to ask each one of you, what are you going to do to develop the east side, to develop the south side, to develop the west side, to get rid of the poverty, and then the guns will go. So let's get real.
Yeah. I'd very much like to speak to that.
Yes, ma'am.
When people come to jail, we don't just lock them up and throw away the key. And today, we spend $5 million a year on training, job education, job preparation, anger management, behavioral intervention, parenting classes, to provide the tools and the capabilities for individuals to return to their community where they can be contributing citizens to our community. Because when they leave there, we want them to be better than when they came there. As well, today, out of everybody who is arrested in Bexar County, there are 40% who don't even come to jail because our courts, our district attorney, our commissioner's court, that whole team looks on it as how can we assure that people don't come to jail between the time they're arrested and when they come back to court, but are entered into programs and provided their conditions of pretrial release so they can already start on addressing the issues that got them to that point. We know that for individuals who, for a first-time offense, are in jail for 24 hours, it increases their propensity to reoffend by 10%. For 48 hours, it increases their propensity to reoffend by 20%, 3 days, 30%. And so we want to make sure that individuals have the kind of interventions, training, programs to help them so that by the time they come to court, they are better prepared to be contributing citizens in our community. GED, training, certifications, all those kinds of things.
Thank you, Sheriff.
And I think one thing I'm glad that she brought up the election is we've talked about a lot of things, but we've just barely touched upon the most important thing in 2016. Now, a lot of these other things are 2015 issues and maybe a 2017 issue, but this year, we've got a problem, y'all. Because what's going on in the African American community right now, what I hear, one of the things, I'm chairman of the African American Summit. It's one of the largest gatherings annually of leaders in the community, and we talk about these issues. And a lot of people in our community are saying, hey, I'm good, I don't have to vote this year. We already got Obama in there twice, I'm done, I never have to vote again. Your vote is more important than ever this year. Now, I'm not going to say which side I'm referring to or what may happen or what may or not happen, but we got to pull out the Obama train again and get everybody, remember the T-shirts and getting everybody riled up, because if we don't do the right thing right now, these problems that we have could be times 10. So my most important thing that we should take away from this, we're looking for solutions and what we do. And I totally agree with the lady that said all we do is talk, because we have so many meetings and we get together, we get riled up, and we go out the door and just look on Facebook and look at the next incident that happened probably while we're sitting here right now, what the next breaking news story is. So what we can do is leave here and get that same enthusiasm which we got our first African-American president in there twice. That same enthusiasm, it's time to rile that up again and rally the troops and get out there and vote.
Let me just say this really gingerly if I can. Sometimes I can't be real ginger, but I'm going to try. While voting is important, it is absolutely important that you and I vote in a manner that is educated. We have too long gotten on political trains that really haven't done us any favors as people and have looked to government again to do something that only God himself can do. When we start addressing the issues of poverty, what I'm reminded of, and just let me just say this before I move on to that little analogy and close. I didn't vote for President Obama in either one of those elections. Not because I didn't enjoy the fact that somehow there's a redemptive process in a black man becoming president in the United States. In fact, I understood the tears of joy that flowed from all of that. I'm not here to politicize one way or the issue or the other side. I believe that when we vote, we ought to take our biblical convictions into the voting booth. And we ought to let those biblical convictions govern what we do in that voting booth, not anything else. Not the color of a man's skin, not where he's come from. None of that stuff matters. Because it's not going to matter in heaven. If it's not going to matter in heaven and you and I are citizens of heaven, why should it matter now? No person is guaranteed to do right by you because he has your same color. So having said that now, I've been as ginger as I could with it. Let me say that when John got confused about Jesus, John the Baptist, in his latter part of his ministry, and he sent some guys to Jesus and said, are you the guy that we're looking for, or should we look for another? There's a story behind that, but Jesus said, here's what you tell John. Tell him what you have seen and heard. Tell him that the blind see, tell him the lame walk, and tell him that the poor have the gospel preached to them. Now, for the blind, his remedy was seeing. For the lame, his remedy was walking. For the poor, Jesus said, the gospel was preached to them. It's no less a remedy to cure poverty to have the gospel preached, because in the gospel you understand who you are. You understand that economics and the circumstances around you do not make you a prisoner. In the gospel, you understand that you're birthed to be a victor. And you start moving toward that regardless of what the circumstance around you are. And when you do, when you and I do with a whole heart, a full heart of faith, we'll find that heaven is non-discriminatory. It doesn't care about the color of your skin, where you've come from. It doesn't care about your pedigree or background. What heaven cares about is whether or not you and I can agree with the principles of God's word and then faithfully obey them and watch supernaturally something happen to change the natural circumstances.
Thank you. All right, so we are definitely over time. I'm sorry I can't get to the last two of you guys. We are going to transition right over to eat, and so you can ask your questions directly to the panelists. Before we go, let me just summarize. We talked about two main issues today. One is how to improve relations between the community and the police. I hope everybody gathered that there are many sides to the issue, and there are a lot of things that contribute, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's poverty, whatever the case is, but we have to have more empathy. The second thing, we talked about gun violence and how that goes hand in hand, and how many statistics, sad statistics there are with kids and people in general killing one another with guns, and how hopefully through the ballot box, we can change a lot of those things and have some common sense gun law reform for our safety, but also the police officer safety when they have to interact as well. I'll say one quick thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bishop Copeland so he can give the closing, and then we can go right over and have some food. The big thing is I'm the incoming chapter president of Alpha Phi Alpha here. When I got here, I went to work. And you would be surprised how many people would sit and applaud but not do work, have effective action, right? So my big thing is, if you're not feeling a burden, then you're not doing enough, because you have to feel a burden, you have to feel some type of stress to know you're putting yourself out there in uncomfortable situations to make a difference. So I would like right now, everybody that's a part of an organization, please rise. Any organization, please rise. Now, as we transition over to get food, please come up to these people and join. If I wasn't a part of Alpha, Bishop Copeland's my fraternity brother. I couldn't reach out to him to get this church. It's power in organization. So you guys are a part of organizations, join, but let us now combine efforts. We have 30,000 different mentoring groups in this city. Why can't we combine efforts, right? So please have a seat. Thank y'all. So that's what I'm talking about. So please network, join Moms Against Gun Violence, join Peace, join all these different groups, and let's make a difference, combine efforts, and then we can make a change within our own community. So thank you so much to the panel members. Let's give them a round of applause. My fraternity brother's about to come up, give us a closing, and then for the panel members, if you can just wait on stage, all the members of Alpha Phi Alpha will come up and we can take a group photo, then we'll transition to continue the dialogue. Thank you.
How many of us are glad we came? I want to thank my Alpha brothers for doing this. It's my hope that this will not be the last time we get together quite like this. We have other subjects and other issues that not only need to be discussed, but then, as Brother Moore said, we have to start acting on so that we can make improvement. I want to thank the panel. Let's give them a... And I want to thank all of you. I told this story some time ago about the rat trap that was in the barnyard. The rat came to the chicken and said, "There's a rat trap in the barnyard." Chicken said, "Okay, no skin off my nose." Ran to the pig, said, "Pig, did you know there's a rat trap in the barnyard?" Pig says, "I'm not a rat. I don't need to worry about rat trap." Went to the cow, said, "Cow, do you know there's a rat trap in the barnyard?" Cow said, "Meh." The lady who owned the farmyard got sick. And of course, when you get sick, what you need to help you to get over your sickness is you got to get some chicken soup. Chicken soup didn't cure her, but neighbors and friends came around, and they came around one morning, so they had to have breakfast. Got some ham and bacon. So the lady died, and then all the relatives and kinfolk came from all around, so they had to have a big barbecue. You may not want to pay attention to the rat trap that's in the barnyard, but one day the consequences of not getting involved could impact your life. So if you're the chicken, you might become soup. If you're the pig, you might become breakfast. And if you're the cow, you could become the barbecue. Lord, we are thankful and grateful for community. Out of one blood you have made all nations. We ask, God, now that you would open up our hearts and our mind and our spirit so that we indeed might show ourselves to be our brother and sister's keeper. I pray, Father, for those who watch over us, those in law enforcement, those religious and community leaders. We pray, God, that you'll guide them and direct them and uphold them. I pray for our community, our families, our sons, our daughters, our teachers, those who serve us. Give us more grace that we might indeed hear you say in that day, my good and faithful servant, well done. Bless this food we're about to receive. And as we go to our several places, give us traveling mercy. Let us find all our goods in order until we gather again. In your name we pray. Thank you. Amen.